They say that no matter how good you are at something, there's always an Asian kid who can do it better. And this applies not only in maths or science, but also in racism. I have been to a lot of countries, but the racism between Asian people will always baffle me. Because you see these people study their racism like nerds. You cannot even argue back with these UFC level racist champions because they are so good at this. And although it is very tough to choose which Asian countries are the most racist, because let's be real, all of them are, the winners to me will be the Holy Trinity: India, South Korea, and China. China's form of racism is largely ethnocentric, meaning it's rooted in ethnic identity rather than skin color alone, although they do prefer pale skin and make diabolical ads like these. While China officially recognizes 56 ethnic groups, approximately 91% of its population is Han Chinese, who have historically held cultural, political, and economic dominance. From building the Silk Road to shaping the foundations of the modern Chinese state, the Han have been central to China's history. This dominance has contributed to a belief that the Han represent the core of Chinese civilization, pretty much like how the British once saw themselves as the pinnacle of progress during their empire. Ethnic minorities of China, such as the Uyghurs, Tibetans, have often been treated as uncivilized or backward and portrayed as culturally and intellectually inferior. As the Han Chinese are predominantly atheist, they also restrict Muslim Uyghurs and Buddhist Tibetans from practicing their religions openly and constantly keep them under surveillance. But unlike China, South Korea is not diverse as they live in a homogenous society. So South Korean racism is more class based. If you are rich, pretty, and fair skinned, they will practically worship the ground you walk on. Fair skin is associated with wealth, as you don't tan while working in an office but darken while working on farms or construction sites. During summer, both Chinese and Koreans avoid the sun like plague. This pale skin obsession is so extreme that their K-pop artists' makeup looks like they are cosplaying for white chicks. Also, in Korea, money and success is a big factor for them. So they will usually be extremely racist towards poorer Southeast Asian and African countries. And although racism in both China and Korea is pretty bad, my goodness, none of them can beat the racism in India. It's like a mixture of both xenophobia and one of the world's oldest and most rigid class systems. Indian Hindus traditionally believe that when the god Brahma created humans, the four main castes emerged from his cosmic body. Light skinned Brahmins came from his mouth, Kshatriyas from his arms, Vaishyas from his thighs, and Shudras from his feet. However, the darker skinned Dalits were not mentioned as emerging from Brahma's body, leading to their exclusion from the sacred social order and being labeled untouchables. Dalits often face violent discrimination. They are denied entry to temples, schools, and even water sources. Many Hindus believe Dalits do not deserve a decent job in the society, so they are assigned tasks like cleaning drains and cremating the dead bodies. The upper caste, especially the Brahmins, are not even allowed to touch them or share the same neighborhood. When the British came to India and saw the caste system, they took full advantage of the situation. They imposed the lighter-skinned supremacy to rule over Indian subcontinent, where the fairest British sat in highest position alongside lighter-skinned Brahmin, while the dark-skinned and poor Dalits were oppressed. Even today, in 90% of Indian marriages, the first thing they see is caste and skin color. Also, the Indian subcontinent is divided into two parts: the dark-skinned South Indians and the light-skinned North Indians. North Indians are extremely colorist toward the dark-skinned South Indians because they believe they possess superior Aryan or Central Asian genes, which make them more desirable. You will still see crazy ads in movies valiantly promoting colorism. Also, an honorable mention to Japan, because after committing millions of war crimes for years, they are now low-key polite about their racism. Like India, Japan once had its own caste system. At the top were the samurai, the elite warrior class. At the bottom were the Burakumin, the untouchable group, who looked ethnically identical to other Japanese but were associated with unclean professions such as butchery, leatherwork, and burial services. In traditional Japanese belief systems influenced by Buddhism and Shintoism, purity and cleanliness are highly valued. Thus, any job involving blood, death, or animal carcasses was considered spiritually polluting. So Brahmins were called untouchables, and they were not allowed to enter shrines or any important places for being impure. Even today, children of Barakumin face marriage rejections and discrimination in hiring and housing. Japan also historically held racist views toward other Asians, especially Koreans, Chinese, and Southeast Asians, which intensified during Japan's imperial expansion in the 20th century. These groups were often portrayed as culturally and genetically inferior, especially under the ideology of Yamato supremacy, a belief that Japanese are divine Asians. And we know how brutal the Japanese imperial was during that time. However, today Japan tries to be a cutie patootie, so you will observe overall less racism in Japan compared to other Asian countries. Speaking of colonizers, the OG colonizer that never gets mentioned are the Arabs. Historically, Arabs were among the earliest and most active participants in the African slave trade, centuries before the European transatlantic slavery began. However, unlike in the Americas, very few descendants of African slaves remain in the Arab world today. That's because Arabs used to make them work in harsh climates and then castrated them so they could not reproduce on Arab land. At present, South Asian workers from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh get trapped in the Gulf Arabs kafala system, where employers control visas and can withhold passports. Reports of abuse, unpaid wages, and assault often come. Now, the common theme between all Asian countries is they are obsessed with light skin, openly think that their religion or culture is superior, and others are just BS. One thing about the West is that they actively acknowledge their problems like racism and colorism and attempt to promote diversity, even though most of the time they are unsuccessful. But Asians will proudly display their racism and try to sweep the problems under the rug. And yeah, that's why I guess their racism will live for a very long time.